The letter that changed everything. Clara Whitmore sat stiffly at the writing desk in her aunt's parlor, pen poised above the crisp parchment. Outside the window, the dusty streets of Philadelphia blurred into gray drizzle, but her mind was far away in the arid promise of the West. Her aunt's clock ticked like a judge passing sentence. And Clara, ever methodical, ever logical, reminded herself, this wasn't desperation. This was strategy. Her options were few. After her father's passing and the dwindling of their estate, she'd spent the last 2 years tutoring girls half her wit and twice her fortune. She was 27, painfully unmarried by societal standards, and more importantly, tired of being praised for her mind only to be passed over for marriage because of it. So she wrote the letter, a mail-order bride advertisement respectfully crafted, elegantly phrased, but firm in one thing. She would not pretend to be less than she was. She spoke Latin. She could fix a pump, balance accounts, and recite Byron better than half the men who quoted him to impress her. If a man wanted a simpering doll, he could look elsewhere. She wanted a partner, not a master. Weeks passed. Then, a reply arrived from a man named Ezekiel Harper, a rancher in Blackstone Ridge, Montana. Short on words, but direct. He needed a wife. He respected cleverness and clear thinking. He offered honesty, safety, and land. Not love, he admitted, but something that could grow into it. The letter was stamped with dirt and the smell of sagebrush. And Claire, after months of silence, finally exhaled. Her aunt called her mad. The neighbors pitied her. But Clara packed 2 trunks, carried her books and her pistol, and boarded the train west with the determined calm of someone preparing to negotiate a treaty, rather than a marriage. Blackstone Ridge was nothing like Philadelphia. The buildings looked half-finished, the people half-wild. Wind tore through the town like it had been chasing her all the way from the east. She stood at the station, clutching her hat, eyes scanning the crowd. A man approached, broad-shouldered, dusty, hands like leather. But when he removed his hat, his eyes were sharp, intelligent, assessing. "You Clara?" he asked. She nodded. "I'm Ezekiel." They did not shake hands. They stared, like 2 poker players measuring the other's hand. Clara spoke first. "I hope you've read my letter carefully." "I don't plan to play the fool, Mr. Harper." He nodded slowly. "Didn't think you would. That's why I answered." But that night, after settling in his home, something changed. Ezekiel seemed distant, distracted. Over supper, his words were clipped. The next morning, a woman Clara hadn't met, young blonde, with eyes full of judgment, peered on horseback and stared Clara down like a challenge. Word spread fast. In towns like Blackstone, by the end of her first week, Clara knew Ezekiel hadn't expected her to come. He'd written the letter half-drunk, on a dare from his cousin. The town had its own expectations, quiet women who didn't read Latin or quote Darwin at the dinner table. When Clara corrected the shopkeeper's math on a bill, he gave her half a loaf of bread instead of an apology. A week later, Ezekiel took her aside. His eyes were kind, but final. "This won't work," he said. "You single quotes read ... not what I need, what this place needs." She left that night, moved into the back of the town's abandoned schoolhouse with her trunk and her pistol. It was no longer about marriage. It was about proving she belonged, even if no one welcomed her. But as word spread of her rejection, so too did whispers of something else: danger. A stagecoach had been robbed just outside town. A marshal was killed. The gang responsible. The Gray Buttes, cutthroats, known for their brutality. And word was, they were headed toward Blackstone Ridge. Clara was alone, rejected, and now, in danger. And yet, just when the town seemed poised to turn its back completely on her, another man rode in. A gunslinger. Known only as Rhett. Rumored to have killed 12 men. Hired by no one. Loyal to no town. Feared by everyone, and the first place he went, the abandoned schoolhouse. The gunslinger's warning Clara heard. The hooves before she saw the rider. Steady, measured. Not the clumsy clatter of a ranch hand, nor the lazy gait of a drifter. Whoever was coming knew how to ride and meant business. She opened the schoolhouse door slowly. Her pistol in hand, but kept low. The wind carried dust like a warning, and the man that emerged through it was carved from something older than stone. Tall, lean. A worn duster flapped behind him, the color of dried blood. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, but even from a distance, Clara saw the silver glint of his revolvers. He dismounted with ease, tying his horse to the rotting porch rail. Then he looked up at her, And in that moment, Clara understood why the townsfolk spoke of him with such care. His eyes were winter. Not cruel but cold, with a sort of detached awareness. He saw everything. And nothing escaped that gaze. "You, Clara Whitmore?" he asked, voice rough as gravel. "I am," she replied. She didn't lower her pistol. He didn't flinch, just nodded once. "Name's Rhett, you and I need to talk. I don't believe we've been introduced." He gave a slight smirk. "You'll want to hear what I've got to say, anyway." Clara stepped aside. Rhett ducked under the crooked frame and entered, removing his hat and brushing dust from his coat with the precision of a man who always kept his hands free in case trouble arrived. He looked around at the books stacked beside her cot, the cracked blackboard, the unopened crate of canned beans. "Cozy," he said dryly. "I make do," Clara replied. "Why are you here?" "Because the Gray Buttes are coming, and they're not interested in burning barns. They're after people. You included." Clara frowned. "Why would they come?" "For me, you embarrassed a man named Wade Felton." Clara's brow knit. "The shopkeeper. His brother rode with the Buttes, died in that coach job last week. You corrected Wade's math and cost him face. Might have been petty. But Wade told his brother you were some mouthy know-it-all who needed taming. Now the gang wants to make an example of you." Clara's throat tightened. Not from fear but fury. "So I'm a target for knowing how to add. For not knowing your place," Rhett replied, "according to men like them." She sat down slowly, the pistol still in her lap. "And why does a man like you care?" "I don't," Rhett said plainly. "But Ezekiel hired me." Her head snapped up. "Ezekiel," Rhett nodded. "Said he made a mistake. Said turning you away was the dumbest thing he's done in years. You were right. About everything. This town isn't ready for someone like you, but it damn well needs you. He's too proud to say it to your face, so he sent me." Clara leaned back, trying to read the gunslinger's tone, his posture. He didn't seem like the type to lie, or to play messenger. "So you're my bodyguard now?" "No, I'm the line between you and a bullet. There's a difference." "And what's your price for that?" Rhett shrugged. "Already paid. Ezekiel gave me his best horse and half his winter grain. Told me to keep you breathing. Told me if anyone tries to lay a hand on you, I end them." "And you?" Clara asked, searching his expression. "What do you believe?" Rhett considered her for a long moment. "I believe the West's changing. Slowly, ugly, but it is, and folks like you. You're the future. I may not like the noise it makes, but I'm not stupid enough to stand in its way." Outside, the wind picked up. In the distance, a faint cloud of dust was building riders, maybe 6. Maybe more. Clara stood, walked to the window, and peered out. Her voice was steady. "How long do we have?" "Till sundown," Rhett replied, checking his revolver with casual calm. "Maybe less." "And after that?" He looked at her, something unreadable, flickering in his cold eyes. "Depends. How fast you learn to shoot." Lessons in Fire and Trust the sun sat low behind the jagged peaks of Blackstone Ridge, turning the sky into a fiery canvas of reds and purples. Inside the abandoned schoolhouse, Clara sat on a battered wooden bench, eyes fixed on the revolver Rhett had laid out in front of her. The metal gleamed, cold and unforgiving. She had held a pistol before her father had insisted she learn, but this was different. This was not a toy or a symbol of status. This was survival. "Grip it like this," Rhett said, crouching beside her. His fingers demonstrated the proper hold. "Thumb, here, finger on the trigger, but don't squeeze till you're ready." Clara repeated his motions, careful, deliberate. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but from the unfamiliarity of relying on brute force instead of brains. "You've got good aim, I'll give you that," Rhett muttered, nodding as she fired the first round into the dirt outside. The bullet kicked back against her palm, a sharp jolt of reality. "Not bad," he said, "but you've got to learn to anticipate, to breathe with the shot, to let the gun be part of you." She wiped sweat from her brow, frustration mounting. "I'm not used to this world. No one is. But if you want to survive here, you've got to become part of it." Hours passed as they practiced. Rhett was patient in his way, though his words were blunt and often harsh. "Out there," he said, nodding toward the window, "those Gray Buttes don't care about how smart you are. They care about how fast you pull the trigger." Clara clenched her jaw. "I'm not just going to survive. I'm going to outsmart them." Rhett gave a half smile. "Good. Just don't forget sometimes, brains alone won't keep you alive." As twilight bled into night, Rhett moved on to another lesson, reading the land. The Gray Buttes will use every shadow, every hill to their advantage, he explained. You need to know where to hide, when to run, when to fight. He led her outside, pointing to clusters of sagebrush, to the broken-down fence posts, to the small creek that snaked behind the schoolhouse. Use the terrain, make the land your ally. Clara listened, absorbing everything, her mind a whirl of calculations, scenarios, and possibilities. She was no stranger to learning, but this was a new kind of knowledge, raw and immediate. When they returned inside, Rhett lit a lantern and produced a battered deck of cards. Time to teach you the art of bluff, he said. Out here, it's not just about shooting straight, it's about reading the other man's eyes, his hands, his breath. Clara raised an eyebrow but took the cards. Poker, she asked. Survival poker, Rhett said. The stakes are just higher. They played in silence for a while, the crackling lantern casting flickering shadows. Rhett was relentless in his silence, his gaze sharp. Clara realized she was learning something deeper than gunplay and geography. She was learning trust. After all, Rhett was a man built on suspicion and solitude, yet here he was, protecting her. When the night grew late, Rhett finally spoke. Why did you come here, Clara? Really? She considered the question. I came because I wanted a life that respected my mind and my will. Because I'm tired of being told to be smaller than I am. Rhett nodded slowly. Then you're lucky I'm here. Because the West doesn't give second chances. Outside, the wind whispered through the broken windows. The sound was like a warning and a promise. Clara picked up her pistol once more, feeling the cold steel in her hands. No matter what came, she would face it head on. Shadows on the ridge, the first light of dawn crept slowly over Blackstone Ridge, painting the rugged landscape with muted golds and shadows. Clara woke with a start, the chill of the early morning biting through the thin blanket she'd wrapped around herself. Rhett was already outside, leaning against the porch post, eyes scanning the horizon. When he saw her rise, he gestured for her to join him. Sleep tight, he asked, his voice low. As well as I could, Clara replied, adjusting her coat. How long do you think before they arrive? Rhett spat into the dust. Less than 4 hours. They're careful, but ruthless. She frowned, her mind racing. For hours to prepare. For hours to turn the schoolhouse a relic of a different life into a fortress. Inside, she moved quickly. Rhett handed her a worn shotgun, and together they barricaded the doors with old desks and broken planks scavenged from the shed. Clara's hands worked with surprising strength and speed, fueled by determination and necessity. Not bad, Rhett said, watching her. The townsfolk were already stirring in the distance. Some peeked from behind curtains, others whispered in hushed groups near the general store. Clara knew many feared the Gray Buttes more so than Ezekiel, but none had stepped forward to defend her. The betrayal stung deeper than any bullet. As she worked, Clara spotted Ezekiel riding into town. His face was grim, eyes shadowed with guilt. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met. He mouthed a silent apology before he disappeared into the crowd. Why didn't he help? Clara asked Rhett. He's got his own battles, Rhett replied, checking his revolver. But he's not a coward. Just a man trapped between pride and fear. The wind carried a distant rumble, the slow, ominous thunder of hooves. Rhett motioned for silence. They're close. Clara's heart hammered. She crouched behind the barricade, shotgun loaded, pistol at her side. The schoolhouse door creaked under the first push. A harsh voice barked orders, laughter followed by the clink of guns being drawn. Clara Whitmore. A voice called out, come out and make it easy. She stood slowly, hands raised, eyes locked on the shadowed figures forming outside. The Gray Buttes had arrived. One stepped forward, a man with a cruel scar across his cheek and eyes like coal. He grinned. You think you're smart enough to outwit us, little lady? Clara's lips curled into a confident smile. I'm smart enough to know you won't last long if you try. The tension broke as Rhett emerged from the side door, revolvers blazing. Gunfire erupted in the dusty street. Bullets tore through the air, sending splinters from the barricades and stirring clouds of dust. Clara fired the shotgun with fierce precision, the blast sending 2 men sprawling. Rhett moved with deadly grace, each shot calculated and sure. The Gray Buttes were ruthless, but they underestimated Clara and Rhett. The town held its breath as the battle raged on. Suddenly, the scarred man lunged toward Clara, knife drawn. Rhett was faster, intercepting him with a swift bullet to the shoulder. Stay down, Rhett barked. The outlaws retreated, dragging their wounded, disappearing back into the scrub brush and rocky hills. The street fell silent except for Clara's heavy breathing and the settling dust. "You did good," Rhett said, holstering his revolvers. Clara wiped sweat and grime from her face, feeling a fierce pride. "Why didn't the town help?" "Fear's a powerful thing," Rhett said. "But you showed them something worth fighting for." Ezekiel approached slowly, his jaw clenched. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "You belong here. Not just with me but with all of us." Clara met his gaze, feeling the weight of the moment. For the first time, the town didn't look away. Building a new legacy, the battle had passed, but the echoes of gunfire lingered in Clara's mind. Blackstone Ridge was still, the dawn casting long shadows over broken fences and scattered spent cartridges. Yet something had shifted. The town, that once looked at her with suspicion, now held a cautious respect. Rhett sat on the porch steps, polishing his revolver with deliberate care. Clara approached, carrying a mug of coffee, the bitter scent mingling with the crisp morning air. "You're quiet," Rhett observed, thinking, she said, settling beside him. "About what comes next?" Rhett's gaze drifted toward the distant hills. "Surviving is one thing. Living is another." Clara nodded. She knew the truth in his words. Protection from bullets wasn't enough. She wanted to build something lasting. Ezekiel joined them. The weight of his earlier regret softened by the light of morning. "I owe you more than apologies," he said. "I want you to stay. To help me run the ranch. To build a future not just for us, but for the town." Clara considered him. The man who had first rejected her now asked her to be a partner in more than just name. "I accept," she said slowly, "but on my terms. Equality, respect, no pretending." Ezekiel smiled, genuine and hopeful. The next weeks were filled with hard work. Clara learned to ride with steadier hands, to manage the ranch's books, and even to mend fences and coax stubborn cattle. Rhett remained close, his presence a steady anchor. But life in Blackstone Ridge wasn't without its challenges. Some townsfolk whispered, uneasy about a woman who read books and carried guns. Wade Felton still glared from his shop, and the shadow of the Gray Buttes loomed. One evening, Clara sat with Rhett by the fire outside her home. The stars were sharp against the clear sky. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. He shrugged. "I'm a ghost. I drift where the wind takes me." "Not anymore," Clara said softly. "You've got a place here." Rhett's gaze lingered on her, something unspoken passing between them. The peace was fragile, but Clara felt ready. For every insult, every gunshot, every hard-fought victory. She had fought for respect and she was determined to keep it. Blackstone Ridge was changing. And so was she. The storm before the calm months had passed since the Gray Buttes' failed attack, and Blackstone Ridge was slowly healing. The town, once suspicious of Clara's intellect and independence, was beginning to embrace the changes she and Ezekiel had brought. But peace, as Clara knew all too well, was often the calm before the storm. One hot afternoon, as the sun baked the earth to a dull, cracked red, a rider came galloping into town, dust swirling in his wake. He carried a message, a warning that the Gray Buttes were regrouping, and this time, they were coming back with a vengeance. The news spread like wildfire. Clara gathered with Ezekiel, Rhett, and the town's reluctant leaders in the small church that served as the community's meeting hall. "We can't run forever," Ezekiel said grimly. "If they come again, we fight." Rhett stood by the window, arms crossed, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I say we make sure they don't come back." Clara's mind raced, weaving together all she'd learned from the sharp mathematics of strategy to the raw instinct of survival. "We prepare," she said firmly. "But we also build alliances. We reach out to neighboring settlements. If we stand alone, we fall. If we stand together, we survive." Her words sparked murmurs among the men and women gathered. Some skeptical, some hopeful. Over the next days, Clara rode with Rhett to neighboring ranches, negotiating support, sharing information, and forging fragile alliances born of necessity. Her sharp mind and steady courage won over even the hardest skeptics. Back in Blackstone Ridge, Ezekiel worked tirelessly to strengthen defenses, and the town prepared for the inevitable. One evening, as Clara stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, Rhett joined her. "You're different from any woman I've met," he said quietly. "I'm not just any woman," Clara replied with a small smile. Rhett's gaze softened, but the steel remained. "The Gray Buttes won't wait long. You ready?" Clara took a deep breath, the wind tugging at her hair. "As ready as I'll ever be." Defiance at dawn, the first light of dawn spilled over Blackstone Ridge, casting long shadows across the fortified town. Clara stood atop the ridge, rifle in hand, eyes sharp beneath the brim of her hat. The air was thick with tension, the quiet, before the storm. Word had come. The Gray Buttes were back. And they weren't coming to negotiate. The alliances Clara had forged stood ready beside her ranchers, townsfolk, and even a few hardened drifters, who owed their lives to Ezekiel's generosity. Rhett moved silently among them, a shadow of death waiting to strike. As the sun climbed, dust clouds billowed on the horizon. The outlaws rode hard, faces grim and guns drawn. "Hold your fire," Clara commanded. "Wait for my signal." The riders charged into the valley, confident in their numbers and brutality. When the moment came, Clara's voice cut through the stillness. Now. Gunfire erupted, echoing off the cliffs as the defenders unleashed a well-planned barrage. The Gray Buttes were met with a wall of bullets and determination. Rhett was everywhere, swift, deadly, unyielding. His revolvers spoke louder than words. And the outlaws fell one by one. Clara's rifle cracked with precision. Each shot a message. She was no longer the rejected bride, no longer the outsider. She was a force to be reckoned with. The battle was fierce and brutal, but when the dust settled, the Gray Buttes lay broken and scattered. Their reign of terror at an end, the townsfolk cheered, their voices rising with relief and newfound hope. Ezekiel approached Clara, dirt and sweat streaking his face. "You saved us." She shook her head, a tired smile breaking through. "We saved each other." Rhett stepped beside her. His usual stoic mask softened by something close to respect, maybe even admiration. "Guess you're not just smart," he said quietly. "You're something else." Clara met his gaze, feeling a warmth she hadn't known she was missing. "Maybe," she replied. "But it's only the beginning." Blackstone Ridge had changed forever, and so had Clara Whitmore. A woman once rejected for being too smart had carved out a place not just to survive, but to thrive.